Okay, happy Friday, everyone. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025. It is the day after the 80th anniversary of VE Day. That's Victory in Europe Day, the day when we celebrate the victory over Nazi Germany and her allies in World War II. President Trump put out a tweet recently in which he said that the United States was by far the country most responsible for winning both World War I and World War II. And I thought that's an interesting claim. Let's address it. Let's start with World War One. Absolutely not. No way. The United States did play a significant role in winning that war, no question. But compared to the French, the British, or even the Russians, we were definitely the fourth most important of the Entente powers. So to claim otherwise is just kind of silly and doesn't bear much debate. World War II, however, does bear a great deal of debate, because I think you can make good arguments for both the United States, Soviet Union, and Great Britain. Everyone seems to forget Great Britain, but I disagree. I think they played a much more critical role than people realize. The trendy answer right now, today, is to say the Soviet Union was the most important player in that. And that is an argument that, frankly, has some pretty good merit to it. The Soviets by far killed the most Germans. They destroyed the most German tanks, the most German artillery pieces, shot down the most German aircraft. And depending on what phase of the war you're talking about, at any time from summer of 1941 to summer of 1945, they bore between 60 and 80% of the entire German war effort. So to say that the Soviets did the heavy lifting in the war is, like I said, an argument with a lot of merit to it. Of course, millions and millions of Soviet soldiers gave their lives, oftentimes with incredible heroism and bravery, in winning the war. However, I do ultimately disagree with this argument, and here's why. First, I think you have to net out the Soviet contribution to Nazi Germany in the first 2 years of the war. From September 1st, when the war starts, until June 22nd, September 1st, 1939, until June 22nd, 1941, when Hitler invades the Soviet Union, Hitler's most important ally, hands down, is Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. They provide substantial mineral resources, substantial oil, foodstuffs, all kinds of important things to the Germans. Even prior to that, they had provided the German army a way to violate the Treaty of Versailles and develop troops and develop tactics and develop equipment inside the Soviet Union prior to the war. Also, they secured Hitler's eastern flank so that he could launch his wars in the west against the Low Countries, the Nordic countries, and France and Britain. In 1940, the British were very concerned the Soviet Union was going to enter the war on the side of Nazi Germany. And frankly, that was a concern that had a basis in reality, because that might have happened. It obviously did not happen, but it was not unreasonable. So I think you have to consider that the Soviet Union did a lot to build the German army that they later had to fight. And they built it while they were while the German army was attacking and invading many other countries. By the way, I'm sorry, I left something out about the Soviet contribution to the war. So kind of going back to the first part of it, the Soviets also bore almost the entire war against countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Finland, all of whom were allies of Germany, all of whom fought extensively on the Eastern Front. Now, to be fair, if you look at Soviet foreign policy in the late 30s and early 40s, it will make perfect sense to you why these countries allied themselves with the Germans against the Soviets. The Soviets did everything they could to give these countries a reason to want to go to war with them on the side of the Germans. But that's my first reason for it. My second reason for arguing that the Soviet Union is not the biggest contributor to winning World War II in general is because that ignores the war against Japan, which was almost single-handedly won by the United States. The British and the Australians certainly have some contributions. The Chinese definitely have some contributions. But in terms of who won the war, Chinese did a lot of fighting. But in terms of who won it, no questions, the United States, and almost by ourselves. The third reason is Lend-Lease aid. The United States and Great Britain gave extensive Lend-Lease aid to the Soviet Union, without which they absolutely would never have won the war. For instance, the Soviet Union was provided with over 8,000 tanks and over 5,000 other armored vehicles, over 18,000 aircraft. They received over 2,000 locomotives and over 11,000 pieces of rolling stock. That's 93% of the Soviet Union's wartime railroad procurement came from the United States and Great Britain. 50% of all their aviation gasoline came from the United States and Britain. Over 42% of all their aluminum came from the United States and Britain. The United States gave more aluminum to the Soviet Union than we did to the United States Navy. The United States gave more ammunition to the Red Army than it did to the United States Army. The British donated something like 15 million pairs of boots to the Soviets. If you don't think that's important, try marching an army across the mud and snow of Russia barefoot. Over 400,000 trucks were sent to the Soviet army. And on it goes. Over 4.5 million tons of food, enormous amounts of machine tools, so think factory equipment, so that the Soviets could rebuild their own industrial base, which had been badly damaged by the Germans. So Russia's most famous general in the war, Georgy Zhukov, said plainly in one of his, I can't remember if it was a diary or a letter, but he said, "We absolutely would not have won this war without the American aid." Stalin himself even said I want to say it was 1945, that they could not have won the war without the aid. So I know kind of the trendy answer right now is it's the Soviets, but I disagree. I think absolutely it's the Americans play the pivotal role in World War II. Again, there's a good argument for the Soviets. I think there's a good argument for the British. The British were the most implacable and indefatigable foe of the Germans. They fought from day one to the last day, and they're one of the only countries that can say that. Neither the United States nor the Soviets can say that. In fact, the Soviets were actively helping the Nazis for the first 2 years of the war. Another contribution by the British to the Soviets is, you may have heard of the famous Battle of Kursk, the German Operation Citadel, in the summer of 1943. The British had cracked the Enigma codes, and they were absolutely providing vital information to the Soviets about Operation Citadel, so that the Soviets knew exactly where to prepare their defenses and where to prepare their counterattacks in the summer of 1943, which is what played a crucial role in their victory at the Battle of Kursk. The British also, by the way, provided the Soviets with a lot of good intel in the spring and early summer of 1942 before Operation Case Blue, or Foul Blau, which the Soviets completely ignored because they're the Soviets, and led to some spectacular German victories in the summer of 1942. So on the intel side, that also becomes pretty darn important. So I would say World War I, it's the French and the English, and to a lesser extent the Russians who win the war. The United States, important but not pivotal. And in World War II, I would say the United States is the most essential country in winning the war. Even if you limit it to just the war against Germany, I would still argue we are the most essential country, although I think there's a strong argument for the British, and there is a strong argument for the Russians, but that argument, or Soviets I should say, very much only works if you ignore the Soviet contributions to the building up of Germany's military prowess and their support of Germany's invasions of Western European countries, and Poland for that matter. So that's my take on it. And, it's always a great debate. So if anyone wants to disagree or say something different in the comments section, feel free. And thank you for watching. And I hope you like and subscribe. Bye-bye.